Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Brokers Open Podcast. I'm Dr. Ben Spears, the Doctor of Flow. I'm here as usual with the big guy himself, Matt Vine. What's up, Matt?
Just living the dream, baby. Living the dream.
Living the dream. I love it. Me too, man. I've brought it into my my vocab.
There you go.
And so I just start saying that. Everybody's always like, "What are you doing, Ben?" You know what I'm doing? I'm living the dream.
Yep.
So
I like it.
part of that dream, Matt, is teaching everybody, how to become better real estate agents, right?
Absolutely. I love guiding them, letting them do the work and getting them across the finish line. Absolutely.
Yeah, let them live the dream.
That's right.
And so that's exactly why we're here. We have a really cool topic that we're going to be talking about.
Yep.
And we talked previously in a podcast about awareness, right? Mm-hmm. It's the first stage from a marketing standpoint. You have awareness, consideration, and decision. We did a deep dive a couple weeks ago on awareness. And I think it's time that we start talking about consideration.
Yep.
And we're not going to get to decision yet, guys. So sorry. All right. Just go deal with that right now. We're going to do a podcast on that later on down the road. But let's make sure we get them through that phase. So why don't you start by letting us know what does consideration even mean, right? And maybe recap even awareness in like 10 seconds to know how we got here.
Yeah, awareness is the person knowing what it is that you're doing, or what it is that you're offering, and what type of transaction you're trying to have. Do they even realize you exist? Right.
Yep.
That's awareness. Consideration is whenever they're in the phase, and what they're basically doing is they're deciding whether or not you have or are able to offer the solution that they're looking for in their transaction. That's really what consideration is all about. So getting that figured out with them to help, for you to help them get through that process. If you can guide them through it, then man, it makes the decision part a lot easier because you built trust during that time. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second.
Yeah, I love that. I love that for sure. And one of the things that I love about the consideration phase is that it has nothing to do with communication.
Okay.
Right? Or maybe it does.
Yeah, it turns
Matt,
out.
Why don't you talk to us a little bit about, why communication is like essentially the foundation and the cornerstone of the consideration phase?
Yeah, so I kind of hinted to it just a second ago. Whenever it comes to the consideration phase, trust is absolutely paramount, okay? And so in order for them to be able to trust you to help them through the rest of what's going on with their decision and even after the transaction, even after it happens, them continuing to have a relationship with you, the communication has to be clear about what it is that their problem is and how your solution can help solve that. So if you're talking to someone that's contemplating selling their property, as an example, and you don't portray any type of, when they're considering using you or not, if you don't portray any type of competency and being able to get their property sold, you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to sign a listing agreement with you. They're not going to put you to work. Or if they do put you to work, even worse, the whole time they're second guessing everything that you're doing because you didn't come across in your communication with them as being confident, which of course is created by competency.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that communication is to set those expectations, right?
Correct. Yep.
And so I've got a two-parter here for you. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those expectations a little bit that say, okay, when you get to the decision phase, this is what's going to happen. But let's talk about the expectations. And at the same time, just because you guys know how I am, I want to talk about a little bit about how we can use technology to help us with that communication. Of course, we have a database, we have a CRM, and mastermind platform that everybody can use. But with this information, you can obviously do this with any CRM or database.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we want to, as much as possible, we want to educate them on the process. I've mentioned that a couple of times, right? But in order to do that, you really have to understand first by listening what it is that they're having an issue with, and then setting an expectation of how you're going to solve that problem. It's not just enough if you don't have a relationship with somebody to say, "Oh, don't worry, just trust me. I've got this. Just trust me, and I'm going to take care of it. You don't have to do anything. Just sign the paperwork and just buy."
Trust me, I'm a doctor.
That's right. Nobody wants to do that, right?
Right.
And so what you have to do instead is you have to set an expectation, and you do that through clear communication, right? Yeah. And so you're listening carefully, you're figuring out exactly what the issue is that they're having, you're figuring out the problem, and then you're saying, hey, this is the expected outcome, but you're also, so not just, a lot of times I think that's where people kind of get stalled out, right? So they're having a conversation, the person tells them what they're trying to accomplish, the seller says, hey, I really need to be, in Texas by August, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can get you to Texas by August. And then it stops there, and you start going into that sales process. You start going into that decision process. All you got to do is, let's get to work and, get the paperwork signed, and we can get it in the MLS and do all these other things that we need to do. And you kind of skipped over that part where it's setting that trust building expectation. We talk about this all the time. You need those I told you so moments. Okay.
Yes.
And whenever I say I told you so moments, I don't mean you're throwing it up in their face and going, hey, I told you so, nanny, nanny, boo boo. That's not what we're talking about. But what we are talking about is you saying a certain thing is going to happen. And as that certain thing starts to happen, you can step back to them and say, hey, look, we're prepared for this. We knew that this was going to happen. We knew that this was going to be an obstacle for us. We knew this was going to be difficult, or we knew we were going to get this many showings in the beginning and then not get contracts because of how we priced it or whatever. That's your chance to show your expertise if you set that proper expectation with them. If you've really leaned in and said, hey, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to get this done, by setting that expectation and then it coming to pass to have that I told you so moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that. So the next part that I want to talk about is like, okay, we know we have to communicate. We know we want to set expectations. We know that the end goal is to get them into the decision phase and make that decision to use us as their buyer's agent or their listing agent, or from an investment standpoint. It's kind of too broad to say, well, we want to get them to the decision phase.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right? Like, what you mentioned trust. Mm-hmm. What are we really trying to do, right? In the consideration phase.
Yeah. So of course it's building trust, it's building transparency, but it's ultimately about building a plan of how to get through that stage. That's really what it's about. But if you tell somebody, hey, look, I'm gonna build a plan for you so that we can get through this part, so that we can get to the decision, they're gonna go like, wait a minute, sounds like I'm being manipulated here.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna want any part of that. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to step by step get them through that. Right? So you're really listening to what it is that they say that their problem is. Okay. And so sometimes the listening, and this is going to go a little bit more in depth. We're not going to go too far off on this. Okay. But sometimes the listening is because of how you phrased what got their attention. Okay. Here's what I mean by that. So let's say that I have an ad running on Facebook or something like that. Okay. And the ad says something along the line of, do you want to get top dollar for your home? Okay. Mm-hmm. To an extent, that's listening. I know that sounds crazy, but just hear me out. What that's doing is that's kind of qualifying a little bit of what that person is actually looking for, because not everybody that wants to sell is trying to get top dollar for their home. Yes, absolutely, that's some of what's supposed to happen. But if that was the only thing that was happening, them getting top dollar for their home, then all of these investors that are buying these properties and turning around and flipping them, guess what? They'd be completely out of business. So it isn't just about getting top dollar for the home. There's other considerations. There's other things to think about along the way. Okay. So sometimes when we market, what we're doing is we're vetting. And as we're vetting, what we're doing is we're creating that expectation of what is supposed to happen. And it doesn't sound like we're listening, but what's truly happening is we're putting something out there and the person is responding to that ad or to that post or to that mailer we sent out or whatever it was, because it sounds like to them that we heard them, because they were going, oh man, I do need to get top dollar for my house. It's time that I sell this so that I can take that money and put it into whatever. And it's time, I want to travel and I wanted this and I wanted that, or I want to downsize and I want to maximize how much I get because I'm not going to buy another house after this one. It seems like we were listening to them.
Yeah.
Because we spoke exactly what they were looking for in that situation. Okay. So that's one part of it. That one's a little bit more of a stretch. It's the truth, but it's a little bit more of a stretch. Okay. The other listening we do, that's the first step, is really all about asking the question and shutting up.
Yep.
Ask the question, shut up. When they start to respond, go 3 deep on it. Okay, I'm not going to get into 3 deep right now, but you've heard it in other podcasts. It's extremely important, especially in the consideration phase. That's why we talk about it as much as we do. Okay, so you're going to go 3 deep on it, and you're going to get real answers from them. They're going to say real things to you about what's really concerning to them, what's really the issue. At that point, once you've done that first, it's easy for you to set the expectations. That's the part that I think a lot of people get, especially real estate agents, get kind of tripped up on, is what they do is they ask a question, they hear an answer that they think is the whole answer, and the truth is it's only a piece of the answer. And so they start putting together a plan and setting expectations and talking to the people about that. instead of going 3 deep, really listening to what the problem is, and then solving based on what that true in-depth problem is. When do you have to be where you're going? Why do you have to maximize and make the most money? Why is it that being in that specific area matters to you? Why do you need to be in that subdivision? Why are you leaving this subdivision and going to a similar subdivision? All of those things are things that you really have to get to the bottom of. Don't just say, "Oh, you need to move. Well, I can help you move and I can get your house sold." Because the next person is going to come in, listen a little bit more carefully, create a little bit better of a plan, and they're going to go with that person regardless of what that person's charging.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're really just talking about like clarifying the needs of that person.
Correct.
Right. You can have 10 different buyers and they're all looking for something different.
Correct.
Right? You can't just say, well, let's do showings.
Correct.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot.
Yep.
You mentioned just a second ago, also you talked about processes and systems, right? When we think about, consideration, and we think about things like building trust, and we think about things like, clarifying the needs of agents. Sometimes we can take that and we can hear it and we can say, well, that has a lot to do with, just communication, me verbalizing back and forth with this person, or going back and forth with text message or whatever, a very manual process.
Right.
Whereas you can, I'm not discounting any of that, right? Like you do need to be talking to your clients, of course, but you can build a process around each one of those 10 buyers that's different, looking for different things. Asking them the same questions.
Absolutely.
Sending out, similar emails to each one of them, sending out similar text messages that are automated. And so I want you to kind of talk about, how does someone build a process around moving someone through the consideration phase that moves them into the decision phase without them literally having to do absolutely everything manually.
Yeah. So first you have to acknowledge that you need the process, right? I mean, that's number one. You've got to come to terms and go, okay, I need the process.
Yeah.
And the process isn't just about, are you having the conversation with people? Because most of the time, you are having the conversation, but we all know the truth. There's times when you get in the car and you leave and you think back to something the seller said and you're like, oh, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I could have said that, or did I say that? Did I remember to say that? If you have an automated process in place, so as an example, our CRM that we offer has a seller management tool to it.
Yeah.
And so it says over a series of emails and text message reminders about the emails and everything that's completely automated, right? You just literally push a button and it connects with the person. What it does, it says, here's the things that we know that we do that are going to matter throughout the transaction. They don't have to hear every one of those. They don't have to see every email. They don't have to read it right as it comes in or anything along that line. Go back to that I told you so moment just a minute ago. That's why I sent you information about this, Mr. Seller, but that's okay. Let's go back and recap this. That's part of what you want to have, that I told you so moment. But you also want to have that moment when they call you up and they go, I really, I understand why you're telling me to do this, because, I read through the information that you sent over, and, I read the seller playbook as an example, which is part of this. I read the seller playbook, and it made a really good point about me making sure that I price the property, in the market, not to sit on the market, right?
Yep.
And so all of that has to be consistently happening. It doesn't mean everybody's going to see everything, everybody's going to read everything, everybody's going to watch every video, everybody's going to touch every step of the process, but it does mean you're delivering it. Think how much better your listing presentation is when you're trying to get them through the consideration phase. That's what a listing presentation is.
Yep.
When you're trying to get them through the consideration phase and you say, Mr. Seller, you know what? I guarantee you while we're sitting here right now, that there are 48 things that have to happen in order for this transaction to go smoothly. And as soon as you sign that paperwork with me, I'm going to make sure that you have access to all of those, and we're going to review those, and we're not going to miss a single point, because I want this transaction to go as smooth as possible for you.
Yeah.
Do you think other listing agents are saying that?
Nope.
And let's say that somehow they've got it kind of halfway figured out and they're saying something similar like that. Do you think they're saying it the same, as effective every time whenever they sit down with a seller? No. They're skipping it sometimes.
That's what I meant. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And so they're just not being consistent, right?
Yep.
And it's not their fault. There has to be a certain level of consistency for you to guide as many people as possible through that consideration phase.
Yeah.
And so the first part to that, like we talked about, is understanding that there is a process. You got to know that there's a process that's supposed to happen. Okay. The second part is you have to put that process in place. And in my opinion, it has to be automated.
Yeah.
It cannot be reliant on you as the person doing
100%.
it. Okay. And then the third thing is you have to review it on a regular basis, because as you get better at what you're doing, as you listen to more of our podcasts, as you start to grow and achieve more and do more with what's happening with your business, you're going to say, oh, when I'm dealing with sellers, I want to add this piece. I want to change. I want to take this piece out. I want to update this so that it's different, so that it's better, and this is how I'm going to update it better. Or you're going to have a great conversation with a seller, and something's going to trip out of your mouth. You're going to go, oh, well, whatever, blah, and you're going to say something. You're going to be like, that was absolutely fantastic. You're not going to say that out loud, but you're going to say that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And from that point on, you know what you're going to do? You're going to make sure that you input that into your transactions and everything, because you want to make sure you keep having that conversation.
Yep.
Okay. Now, with all of that being said, the best way to make sure that happens is by memorializing it right after you say it, and then putting it into automation.
Yep. I love all that. And so, we have experienced agents that listen to the podcast. Of course, we have newer agents that listen as well. And so I think an experienced agent is going to say, gosh, I do a tremendous amount of deals. Yes, it does kind of wear me out. If they don't have that process, I can understand the value of why I need to build that, and I need to build that tomorrow or yesterday. From a new agent standpoint, I just want you to touch on this, maybe like 60 seconds. From a new agent standpoint, they may think, well, this isn't important really for me, because, I have the time to take my one client, my first client or something like that, or my no clients.
Right.
I have time to do this manually.
Right.
I can stay right on top of those people, make sure they're taken care of, like, the best agent in the world. We know that as they grow and they get better in the business, that's not going to translate. And the worst thing that you can do is start building a process when you need it.
Right. Correct.
Right. And so I want you to touch on that just for a second for our newer agents, so they don't, dismiss some of this and say, well, that's not pertinent to me right now.
Yeah. So part of the reason why it's not pertinent to them right now is because they're hearing from a lot of other people. Well, it doesn't matter if you know how well you're doing business. If you're not out there prospecting, you're not going to have anybody to sell to, right?
Yeah.
They're hearing that a lot. Okay. Is there truth to that? Yes. Is it the most relevant part? No. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people come in and get started and get up and running and then wear themselves out. And then they start chasing around every possible solution they can when they're too busy to actually implement it into their business. Okay. So get it figured out now. The best way to get it figured out now is best practices. Okay. So here's how I would best explain this. If you had the chance, you're a quarterback that's just coming out of college and you're going into the pros, and you could somehow plug in what Tom Brady knows and Peyton Manning knows and Aaron Rodgers know about throwing a football and doing, being a quarterback, would you want to plug that into your head?
Right. Yeah.
It's a yes or no question, right? And it
Yeah.
seems like it's a simple yes,
Yeah.
right? So if that's the case, why would you not have a process in place that's been proven to work with other people, and other people are saying you have to have this? Why would you not start with that? Why would you not plug it in? Or would you wait until you were in the league for 3 years and then decide to plug that in?
Yeah.
Because that's what's really happening, is a lot of people are thinking that's the case.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I think that really kind of hits home with the new agents, why this is so important for them as well. Well, Matt, if you don't have anything else, I'll go ahead and put a little bow on it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Let's wrap it up and just and we'll make sure that we go through the decision phase as well. So just kind of be on the lookout for that.
Yep, I love it. Well, guys, I've got 2 things I want to ask you to do really quick. Make sure you go to the links in the description below. If you want to come to a live mastermind where Matt and I are talking about how to grow your real estate business, it's every single Thursday. It's absolutely free to attend. You just have to register in that link below so that you get the email with the Zoom link on Thursday mornings. Secondary to that, we've talked about a CRM multiple times that we have to offer. There's a link down there to my calendar. If you want me to personally show you how the CRM works and how to grow your business, man, click on that, and that will. And I'd love to show you that. Beyond that, thanks for listening to Brokers Open Podcast, powered by Prime Real Estate Coaching, where it's not just about opening the door to more opportunities; it's about closing more transactions.